Hey, this is MJ, and in today's tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to make a granny stitch Ruana. This is an easy pattern that's worked in one piece from the side across. It has this beautiful vertical striping and it's all created with the yarn that I'm using. So I'm using Prism from Maxim. It's a DK weight light yarn, which is a number 3. And this is 100% acrylic. I'll be working with the color Surfside in this tutorial. And I also have made a second Ruana in the color Succulent, which is a new color from Maxim. And the pattern also includes 2 lengths. So I show the Surfside Ruana in knee length, and the Succulent Ruana is shown at about thigh length. The sizes in the pattern include extra small to 5X. I'll be showing you how to crochet the medium to extra large size in this tutorial. It is an oversized fit with 10+ inches of positive ease. So take a look at the pattern and choose your size based on your preferred finished measurement. You'll need 2 hook sizes for this pattern, a 5mm and a 4.5mm, and these hooks are also from Maxim, and I'll have all of these items linked in the description box below the video. So now to get started, we're going to make a pocket, and that is going to help you out with doing a really quick and easy gauge swatch to make sure you're on track with the pattern, and I'm going to give you the stitch count to start the Ruana out. Because we're just working back and forth in rows, the Ruana is very easy and straightforward. So we're going to start off with that pocket, and then you can give your gauge a check, and then you can get right started onto the long stretch of the Ruana. So the gauge for this pattern in your granny stitch is you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clusters. And if we check the rows, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rows in 4 inches. So 5 clusters and 9 rows in 4 inches will be the gauge. So let's get started with the pocket. So for the pocket, we're going to be chaining out a total of 25. So our stitch pattern is worked in a multiple of 3, and we're going to chain out 1 extra for our turning chain. So 24 is our multiple of 3, and then 25 adds that 1 extra chain. So once you have your 25 chains, we're going to work double crochets across. So in the second chain from the hook, but I am going to turn my work and I'm going to crochet into the back bump. So if you're able to do that, it'll just make your edge a little bit nicer. So I am going to work double crochets into that back leg of the chain. Okay, you can, if you really turn this on the side, you can see how there's a little loop that bumps up. So you're getting into that loop. So I'm going to work all the way across in doubles, and you should have 24 double crochets. Okay, so now once you've worked across in your double crochet, I'm going to chain 3. That's going to count as my first double crochet. I'm going to turn, and I'm skipping over 3 double crochet stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and then in between that 3rd and 4th double crochet, we're going to work a cluster. So a 3DC cluster is going to be made by placing 3 double crochet in that space. So 1, 2, 3. I'm going to skip the next 3, 1, 2, 3, and do a cluster in between. going to do this all the way across. So we're skipping 3. Once we get this established, be really easy here on out. Skip the next 3, work a cluster. Skip the next 3. Okay, and now we're coming to the end. You should have 3 stitches remaining, and we are going to add a double crochet between the last double crochet and the second last. Okay, so we start with a double, end with a double for 1 row, and then our other row will have a cluster at the beginning and at the end. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then this row will have 7 clusters and 2 doubles. And then our next row will chain 3, turn. This will be our beginning cluster, which starts with a chain 3, which counts as a double, and then we add our 2 doubles in that same space. So we've made our first cluster. And then we will add clusters in the spaces between the clusters across. So now once you get to the end, you're going to have your turning chain, and we're adding our last cluster into the turning chain. Okay, so now we're going to chain 3, turn, and we'll be skipping the first cluster. This is our row that it's going to start with a double now, and we'll add our first cluster between the clusters. Next cluster between the clusters. Okay, and I'm going to work that across. Okay, so now as we get to the end, we're coming to our final cluster, and we need to add our double crochet between that chain 3 and double crochet right here. Okay, so in the turning chain, you'll be adding that double crochet. Chain 3 and turn, and then we'll be repeating row 3 and 4 throughout for the pocket. So now I need a total of 15 rows for my pocket. So I'm going to go ahead and crochet those up following this pattern. And when we get into the Ruana, it is going to follow exactly the same pattern. So we're starting it the exact same way. Okay, so I've worked my rows, and we can give them a count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So you want to make sure that you are ending on a row that ends with a cluster. You can see this is going to be a good width for the pocket because it's going to go across this way, the same as the Ruana. So what we're going to do at this point now is I want to create a nice little ribbing going across the top of the pocket. So I'm going to change over to the smaller hook, which is our 4.5 millimeter. I'm going to chain 1, And then as I work across the rows, I'm going to work 2 single crochet per row. So one of your rows is just going to have your double right here on its own. And then the next row is a cluster row. So we're going across this double. Okay, so I'm gonna work that all the way across. Okay, so I've worked all the way across and that's 30 stitches. And now we're going to do a little ribbed band. So I'm going to start with a chain. So I've chained out 6. Now I'm going to single crochet in the second chain from the hook. And in each chain across. So we're going to end up with 5 single crochet stitches. Now what I'm going to do is skip the first stitch and then, which is right here, and then I'm going to slip stitch into the next 2. Turn, skipping over the 2 slip stitches I just made, I'm now going to single crochet through the back loops only of each stitch. So 5 stitches. Chain 1 and turn. I'm going to work back down. Single crochet through the back loop only. Okay, and I'm going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches, turn, and we're going to continue repeating this all the way across. 1 row per stitch. Okay, so I'm coming to the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I have 1 stitch remaining. So I'm going to slip stitch and then turn and work back up the row. Okay, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30. Now what we're going to do is fasten this off with a long tail. We're going to use it to sew on. So you want to make sure you have a nice big long tail so that you can sew all of this onto the Ruana. We can weave in this starting tail here and get it out of the way. So for the Ruana, we're going to follow the same stitch pattern exactly as the pocket, but we need to do a larger chain. This is quite a long section because we're doing the front and the back all as one. So it's a very long stretch. We're going to have 80 clusters in total. So we'll need to chain out 241. Our multiple is 3, and we need a total of 240 stitches. And then when we need to add that additional chain for the turning chain. So we need to chain a total of 241. Now, if you want to alter the length of the Ruana, you can do that at this point. So you can go ahead and chain out 241 and then work the exact same pattern as we worked for the pocket. You can rewind the video and just go over that section again if you need help to get started. And for the Ruana section, you will again be working with the larger hook. We will just be using the smaller hook when working the ribbing. Okay, so once you work a total of 26 rows, this is what you're going to have. Now you can always make this bigger, follow along with the size you're working on. And I'm just gonna give it a little measure here for you. So depending on where you measure, you can sometimes get some different measurements. So it should be about 12. So you're looking at having about 12 inches worth of work. And like I say, you can always make this bigger. It's really simple, just as many rows as you want. So once you have your 26 rows worked, I started working a bit of this. I'm going to pull it back. So I began working my 27th row. And what you want to do is only work half of the Ruana. So you're only going to do 40 clusters. So this row that we're starting with, the 27th row, you're going to start with a cluster, okay? So the rows that start with a cluster have a total of 80, whereas our rows that start with our chain only have 79. So starting on this row makes it even for doing your clusters. So you're going to go across, you're going to work 40. Okay, so I've worked up to my 40th cluster. Then I'm going to chain 3. Okay, we're going to turn our work. And then we're going to continue working rows for our neck section. Okay, so we're going to have, just again, continue working in rows, but now this section will be, if we look at it like this, you're going to have an opening for your neck. So this will continue working across the back, and then we'll have our opening in the front. So we're going to continue in our pattern, and I want that I have around 6 inches for my neck. So if you're going by inches, I mean, and this is sometimes where you can take the measurements, and if you've used a different yarn, a different weight of yarn, if your gauge is a little off, this is an easy pattern to just work your measurements. I know I get a lot of questions sometimes about switching out yarn weights, or maybe you have a 4-weight yarn that you really want to use up for this pattern. So if you don't go by rows, you can always go by inches to get the right sizing. So I'm going to continue working rows now to get this neck piece, and then we'll meet back up, and I'm going to show you the next step for working the second half of the Ruana. So I've been working away, and once you've completed 15 rows, we need to add a chain here. Now you can always add it once you've completed 14 rows, or just work across and then add it. I like to see sort of what color I'm at with the ball of yarn, and then I like to add on the same color. I'm just going to check the center, the outside. So I'm going to grab a separate ball of yarn, just making sure that I get some of the brown for adding this chain. Okay, so I found one of my balls that had sort of the darker brown, but still close enough. And I'm going to join into that chain. And I'm going to chain out 120. So that is our 40 clusters we need times 3. Okay, so once you have 120 chains, you're going to fasten off. And now the row is just set up so that you can keep working right across. So now what we're going to do for this row is you want to work a double crochet into every stitch across. Because we don't have any spaces, we just want one in every stitch across that chain. And then when we come back, we'll separate out those clusters into groups of 3 so that we end up back into that cluster pattern. But for now, we're going to need to work across just double crochets, and that is 1 in every chain for 120. Okay, so I'm going to work that across. So once you've worked across 120, we're going to be on the row that starts with a chain, this time back across. So we're going to chain 3 and turn, and then we're going to skip 3, so 1, 2, 3, and then work a cluster in between the stitches. 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to skip the next 3, 1, 2, 3, and do a cluster between the stitches. Okay, so I'm going to continue this across, and I'll meet you up once we get back to the next section. Okay, so we've worked all the way across to the body section, or the neck section here, and you're going to go right into that space. And then you're going to just continue across in your spaces between your clusters. And you're just going to go back and forth in rows as we've already been working. So nothing new. And you're going to want to work the same number of rows as you worked for this side. So I've worked 2 so far. So depending on the size you're working on, this could be different. So once you have completed both sides of the Ruana, you're going to lay it out and block it on the blocky mat. So I wet it first in some lukewarm water with a little bit of dish soap and allowed it just to set in the water for about 25 minutes. Then I squeezed out as much water as possible, rolled it in a towel, and then I blocked it out to measurements. So now I've removed all of my blocking pins, and it's going to be ready for the next step. Okay, so once you have the Ruana blocked, what I'm going to do next is work on a small amount of ribbing that's going to go around the edge. Now, if you don't want to add the ribbing, that's fine. You could just go with a simple edge, a single crochet edge around, and that would work perfectly fine. But I am going to add a join as you go ribbed band. So I'm going to take my yarn. Okay, so let's put a slip knot on our hook. And we're going to join down into our chain space, and we'll work a single crochet. And then I'm going to work a single crochet into each stitch. So you're going to work single crochets, and then when we get to the neck opening, you'll work 2 single crochet per row. Okay, so when you get to your cluster row, 2 single crochet, and then when you have the chain or 1 double crochet row right here, you'll do 2. So you're going to work this all the way around, fasten off, and then we'll meet back up for the next step. Okay, so I've worked all the way to this side. I fastened off, and then we'll be coming back and joining back onto this side again. And we're going to be doing the join as you go ribbing on the right side, just because it will be a nice cleaner edge as we slip stitch across this. So I'm going to put a slip knot on my hook. And going into the first stitch, I'll make a slip stitch, and then I'm going to chain out 6. We'll single crochet in the second chain from the hook, and in each chain across. So I am just making this ribbing 5 stitches wide. If you want to change that, you can. And I'm going to skip the first stitch, the one that we slip stitched into, and we're going to slip stitch into the next 2 stitches. I'm going to turn, skip those 2 slip stitches, so they're going to be the first stitches you see, and then we'll work single crochets through the back loop only the 5 stitches. Chain 1 and turn, single crochet through the back loop only, 5 stitches. Now you can see this stitch right here has a slip stitch in it. The next stitch does not, okay? So you really want to look and make sure that you're not trying to go back into the same stitch. You don't want to be skipping a stitch. You want to make sure you have 1 row worked for every stitch along the edge. So make sure when you're doing these slip stitches that you are going into the right stitches. So look at it really closely. This one we already worked into. We need to go into the next 2. And we're just going to repeat this process, working all the way around the neckline of the Ruana, creating this nice little ribbed band. So we're skipping over 2. If you want to switch up how you do your edging, working it in single crochet, that's fine as well. But this sort of ties in the little ribbing that we did on the pocket. So So I'm going to continue now with this. Just repeating those rows every time you work back down to your edge. Make sure to take a look. This one has been slip stitched into, so I know I go into the next two. You're going to repeat this all the way over to this edge. So it's going to take a little bit of time to work all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. Then next, what we're going to do is decide on our side seams. So we could leave a little bit of opening up the side if we want, or we can seam all the way up and just leave an arm opening, and you can seam as little or as much as you really want to give as big an arm opening as you would like for the Ruana. Okay, so I finished working the band all the way around, and I'm going to show you how to seam up the sides. Now what I have done is marked with my stitch markers how far that I want to seam, so you can do really whatever you want. I've left a pretty big armhole. After trying it on, I may decide I want a little bit more, so I'm going to go this far and then just see how I like it, but I do want a fairly big armhole. And I want to start out with getting this onto the bottom here, knotting it on, just so we can have that secure. And then we're going to start. Now, this is going to be a mattress stitch, and this is going to hide the color of yarn you're working with. So what you want to do is, I'm doing a fairly big section, so I'm going through all basically the cluster, hiding the yarn through the stitch on this side, and then I go through and do the exact same thing on this side. So just hiding then what you're going to do is just go back and forth. So we're going to hide the yarn on this side, and then go on this side. And as you pull it, it's just going to pull everything together. Now this one, sometimes as you go, if you notice that you're not hiding it well, you can always pull it back. I'm gonna try that again, make sure I hide that a little bit better. You can always just pull it back, just like that. And try to get through and hide it best you can. If you were doing this all in one color and you didn't have to worry about the yarn color popping through, you could just do a normal whip stitch by putting your right sides together. Now I have my right sides facing upward. I'm actually seaming this on the right side of my work. So I'm going to continue seaming this all the way up to my markers and make sure to do both sides of the Ruana. Okay, so I finished seaming up the sides. So this is what it looks like when it's all finished. And I did end up going with 30 clusters rather than 25 because I did find once I put it on, I preferred the look of having it a little bit higher. So I will make sure that a note was popped up, but I did end up seaming 30. And I have attached one pocket already. So what I like to do is try the Ruana on at this point and sort of adjust where I want to place the pocket based on where my hand comfortably sort of would fit. So for me, that's about 14 to 15 clusters from the bottom. So I went ahead and I used the mattress stitch again to attach the pocket, so you can see we don't see all of the yarn for sewing it. So over here, I'm going to do the same. And I went inwards about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 clusters. So the 8th cluster, I seamed the pocket to. So I like to get my pocket positioned. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And then 8. So I just use some stitch markers to sort of get my pocket placed evenly. As long as you do them the same on each side, you can adjust it however you want on the Ruana, but just make sure that they are even so that you're doing the same thing on both sides of the Ruana. So now what we're going to do is take our yarn needle and to do the mattress stitch, we're going to do this just like we were doing how I showed you on the sides, but instead we have to go through the Ruana and then come back going through the pocket. And I'm using the tail, so you can always turn your piece so that it makes sense for you doing this. And then make sure as you're doing this, you're going, you have to go through the Ruana and the pocket to make sure you're actually sewing it. And if as you're working this, it doesn't look right, you can always pull it out. This ultimately is so that we have a nice seam that you can't see the yarn. On the other side, I was using, for instance, the white color as I was sewing the pocket, but you can't see any of that. The odd little piece maybe, but because the color changes as you work around, you want it to blend right in. And you can go through each cluster the same as we were doing when we were joining up the sides. And that does kind of make it go a little bit quicker if you just push the yarn through each cluster on each side. So I'm going to go ahead, and because I've used my markers to attach it, it's really easy. I know it's going to be nice and even. So I'm just going to work all the way around and then weave in my tails. Lastly, you can do a little bit of extra steaming. Steam the seams a little bit of steaming on your ribbing just to get everything smoothed out and ready for wear. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and tap the bell to stay updated on all my new videos and tutorials. Make sure to check the description box below this video for all the links. Thanks so much, guys. Have an awesome day.